for 8 months.
All right. Awesome.
Okay.
Ready? All right, here we go. Stand by. Video, of course, is already running. Audio in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
All the other girls here are stars. You are the northern lights. They try to shine in through your curtains. You're too close and too bright. They try and they try, but everything that they do is the ghost of a trace of a pale imitation of you. The song by Josh Ritter was written for Kathleen, but it very well could have been our special guest's song. She's inspired many. Our very special guest today is author Jenny Boyd, and welcome to the Jeremiah Show. Welcome, Kat. Welcome, Jenny. Dr. D. Everyone is here. This is going to be a great show. Her new book is Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. Let me do that one more time, Richard. 3, 2, 1. Her new book is Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. Did it again. Okay, one more time. 3, 2, 1. Her new book is Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse, and it is fascinating. This is one of those rare books where you get what you paid for, Dr. D, and then some in great story. I love a good personal journey story, personally. Jenny's story is a page turner. I can't imagine what it was like to live it in real life. That's because Jenny Boyd has lived several lives, while the rest of us were just living one. In college, while getting her master's in counseling and psychology and a PhD in humanities, her dissertation on musicians and creativity became the critically acclaimed book, Musicians in Tune. 75 contemporary musicians discuss their creative process. You can pick that up on Amazon too, by the way. Jenny Boyd is a muse to some of the most prolific musicians in the world. Let's think about that just for a minute. What is a muse? A muse is a person and a force who is the source of inspiration for a creative artist. The artist-muse relationship has been around for centuries, dating back to the Greeks. Sometimes the muses have more to offer than inspiration, however, as did the following women that I'm going to mention here for various artists. The muse also and usually contributes substantial bodies of work of their own, in some cases becoming better known than their male partners. Camille Claudel, she was a muse to Auguste Rodin. Bertha Morisset, she was muse to Edward Manet. George O'Keeffe, she was a muse to Alfred Stieglitz. Lee Miller, muse to Man Ray. Frida Kahlo, she was muse to Diego Rivera. And Dora Maar, she was muse to Pablo Picasso. Jenny Boyd, muse to countless musicians and artists. As a natural flower child, Jenny soon became part of the counterculture in San Francisco during the flower power era. My mom was also a part of that. Maybe you guys crossed circles there in the park. Witnessing the Summer of Love, she was the inspiration for Donovan's famous song, Juniper. And her photograph was featured inside the box set of his album, A Gift from a Flower to a Garden. As an up-and-coming young model, Jenny found herself at the heart of Carnaby Street in London, immersed in the fashion and the pop culture of the 60s with her boyfriend at that time, Mick Fleetwood, her sister Patty, George Harrison, have you heard of him? And the rest of the Beatles. She lived the London scene. She was the London scene. Jenny attended Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's ashram in India to study meditation with her sister and the Beatles, witnessing their creativity and the genesis of songs that would later appear on the White Album. Yes, she was there sharing the experiences with the Fab Four for the very best album of all time, the White Album. As an up-and-coming young model, Jenny found herself at the heart of Carnaby Street, as I said, in London, and her 2 marriages to Mick Fleetwood, founder of Fleetwood Mac, brought her to the forefront of the world of rock and roll. It's fame, it's money, it's drugs, and it's heartaches. Jenny has spent her life in the company of some of the greatest musicians and cultural influencers over the last 50 years, or from the last 50 years, and the journey she takes to finding her own sense of self and creativity and her creative ability makes Jennifer Juniper, A Journey Behind the Muse, a truly captivating and inspiring story. And it is actually called Jennifer Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse, but I like to say behind for some weird reason. So I wanted to correct that. This is a really captivating, inspiring story. And we have Jenny Boyd as our special guest this hour. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Jeremiah. And what a lead up.
I could never do justice to your life. And your book is, like I said, a page turner. It's a one great story after another. And wow, congratulations on the book that you can buy on Amazon, by the way, for all listening. Let's talk about the importance of a muse, since it's part of your title there. And you're a self-described muse. Tell us from your perspective, from the muse's perspective, how important is a muse to an artist,
Ooh,
to the world?
gosh, that's a big question.
You could.
I think it is important. I think it's something, as far as I can tell, inspiration is the most important thing. For me, inspiration is what I crave and long for and hope I can inspire others. And I think that it's just someone, or a muse could be the Himalayas, who knows, that just inspires one to write a poem or write a song or write a novel. And I think it's all about inspiration and what really just, what gets your imagination going, what really grabs you. And you somehow have to express that. And I think a muse can be just something that connects with you as an artist, but actually calling myself a muse, which I suppose, through, where Donovan was concerned, that felt rather strange. I understand now in later life what a muse actually means, but I didn't think of it then at the time in the 60s. I mean, I was only 19 then. So yeah.
Does a muse doesn't know they're a muse, and I don't think. And an artist probably doesn't even go out and say, hey, they don't put an ad out and say, hey, can I looking for a muse, please apply. It just happens, right? It, like you said, it's the inspiration, and you never know where it's going to come from. But you have, to your credit, inspired many great minds that have created some of the, the soundtracks to our lives. That's very unique. So you are an inspiring person in many ways.
Thank you.
Can we start back at the 60s? I wanted to talk about just you and your sister and your relationship, and kind of growing up in this and coming into this era, this period that now is so famous to everyone, the 60s, the 70s, and the music, the musicians that were, that came into their own at that time. At that time, that you knew an Eric Clapton and some of the Beatles, they were on their way up, right? They were making their way, Mick and the Fleetwood Mac crew. You grew up in that. Tell
absolutely.
me.
I mean, when Mick and I first met each other, I was still at school. I was still in high school. And he was in a little local band in Notting Hill Gate called the Shanes. And there was a coffee mill in Notting Hill Gate, and that's where my friends and I would all go to after school, have our hot chocolate or coffee. And I don't think we had coffee then. And Mick must have seen me, because he told me years later, he thought to himself, that's the girl I'm going to marry one day. And we were both 16, just,
wow.
And he did twice.
We did twice. Yeah.
How amazing. So you weren't yet on coffee. You weren't on the hard stuff yet. You were just on the hot
No,
chocolate
no,
still.
no. Hot chocolate.
Well, let me
Yeah.
just mention some of the musicians if you don't. Well, before I do that though, your sister and you, so you went to you hung out, or have you always been close? Your sister and you?
Yes, yes, yeah. I mean,
Uh,
we had a sort of rather strange childhood because we were brought up in Africa, and it was kind of white mischief era, anybody who knows about that. And so as children, we sort of looked after each other, really. I think our
Mm.
parents were slightly kind of out there. And so we've always been close.
And we're talking about Patty
And
Boyd. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention her name. Patty Boyd, your sister.
yeah. But the funny thing is, she became, because she's older than me, she became a model, a photographic model, while I was still at school. And it didn't occur to me to become a model at all. I thought, because I love writing and I loved English literature, and I thought maybe one day I'll become a journalist,
Mm-hmm.
as you do. I had no idea really what I was going to do. And then I got my then sort of boyfriend was painting. He and Mick had played together in the Shanes, and the Shanes had broken up, and so he was painting, doing whatever he could, painting sort of people's studios or whatever they needed. And he came across these fashion designers, Fole and Tuffin, and they were looking for a model to show their clothes off. And he said, well, my girlfriend's at school, but I'll tell her to come along this afternoon and you can sort of check her out. And so I did. And they said, yeah, we'd really love you to, they were in Carnaby Street, be our house model. And that meant showing their clothes off to all the fashion designers at that time, and, the glossy magazines. And I never told my mum. I just left school and started work the following Monday. And that was it. It just kind of found me rather than me seeking it out.
Now, when you're living this, when you're young, you're modeling, you're dating some musicians, you're dating Mick Fleetwood eventually. But at that time, he wasn't Mick Fleetwood, was he? It wasn't Eric Clapton.
He wasn't.
Yeah,
It
wasn't.
No. Yeah. I mean, Eric was Eric Clapton, and I knew Eric at that time because, wherever the Shanes would play, often Eric was there doing his thing. Or, if we go down to a club called the Flamingo in Soho, where Mick would be playing, often Eric was playing there because that's where John Mayall used to play. So we'd see Eric playing as probably a sort of 18-year-old. And so we all knew each other, kind of nodding hello and kind of recognition.
Did it feel like you were into something special, or was it just, this is my life and we're young and we're living and experiencing?
Yeah. I think when you're sort of like that age, sort of 16, 17, everything is exciting, the world is opening up. So you don't think of it like one day in 50 something years time, we'll be looking back at this and we'll be, we had no idea it was going to be a kind of iconic time.
Well, and speaking of iconic, the images, some of the magazine covers and magazines you've been in, the photos are very, very iconic, and they are of that time, almost a timeless quality. They're really enjoyable to look at. And I wanted to send, listeners out there to thejennyboyd.com. You've got a gallery there with some of those photos, from the Donovan album to different magazine covers. And they're very, very cool. Just really beautiful and timeless photos that capture. You can see the Muse quality. You can see what you have. You're drawn to. You pop off the page, and so definitely go to her website and check those out. Can you tell me how, as you met Mick Fleetwood, you hung out with Mick Fleetwood, he had said to you, he had said to himself, that's the girl I'm going to marry. Did you ever follow up with him and ask him why he knew that, how he knew that? What did he say, if so?
No, I never did. I'll have to ask him next time I see him.
Hey, Mick, give us a call.
But, but he has this ability, I think, and probably when he first met, say, Stevie and Lindsay, when the band was becoming kind of half American, band, he has this intuitive sense, I think, where he just knows something is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when he was at school, he knew that one day he would be a drummer, just before, when he was really young. And it was almost as if he's a big vision person.
Yeah, no, he is for sure. You get that from him. I think that, I mean, you had so many experiences. Your sister married. Did she marry into the Beatles? Would that be a nice way to say it? She married. And she. I mean, you both have been instrumental in the lives of some of these people that we all idolize and love over the years. Why do you think that happened? Is it that you loved music and you were around music, or how did you both?
Well, loved music, absolutely loved music, loved dancing. I remember when we first came back from Africa, and it must have been about 7, and a year or so afterwards, I remember hearing some 50s music, which of course I'd never heard before, and all I wanted to do was dance, but I didn't know what dance was, except I knew I wanted to move. And so music, I think, has been a huge feature in my life, and still is, and dancing. And I think maybe, and I know Patty loved music and whatever the latest songs, Roy Orbison or whatever it was. And so we were drawn to that, but I don't know. I think that they say often that artists and musicians are like puers, or puellas, people who never really want to grow up. But I think that's how we were as kids, and as we grew up, we sort of liked the idea of, because I don't think we had any sort of maternal or paternal influences. We were just like kids, slightly running wild. And I think in a way that's very much like the musicians in rock and roll. It was like we were all a bunch of kids.
You were kindred spirits.
Yeah.
I think what I get from reading the book and hearing the stories also is that you crave the human experience, the human connection almost, and that it's very important to you. Do you think that's, describe that a little bit? Why the human connection is so important to you, and has it benefited in the relationships that you've nurtured over the years and known the people that you've known? Did that come maybe from, and just a little quick follow-up, did that come from maybe not having a parental oversight as much, and that you just found your way and that you were looking for that maybe? And others?
I think so. And now just thinking, kind of off the top of my head as you're asking that question, is that I felt no connection to my mother and no connection to my father. But then I felt deep connection to Patty and my brother. And then later we had a little sister, and then my mother, and then we had a stepfather, and little sister, all got the flight back to England, and we were left in Africa for about another 6 months or so. But it was, I think the connection I had with Patty and my brother, I think maybe that was the beginning of knowing what it felt like to feel connected to another person. And
to a family, and almost, huh?
Also, yeah. And how important that is.
You write about, the music scene, the scene that you were in, fame, money, drugs, heartache. When, and you're in that scene in London, from the Beatles to, like I said, you mentioned Eric Clapton, to Mick and his bands, and all the rest, all the different people that you've met in that time. When did it feel like it was time to move and to do your own thing, to move to, you moved to San Francisco, and you were a self-described flower child. When did it feel like, what happened where you decided this is the time I should maybe do something new, discover myself a little bit?
What happened is that I was getting a lot of work as a photographic model. So I was working a lot. I found out that I didn't like doing the catwalk, whereas other models paid a lot of money so that they could walk just in the right way and, do the whole thing. And I couldn't bear that. It made me feel really self-conscious. So I began, and I think it sort of started a trend from there. I began dancing. So I would dance along. And I think that became and represented more about the 60s, the sort of vibe of the 60s was more kind of fun rather than classically trained catwalk models.
Free. You were free.
Free. And so I had a lot of jobs, and I worked, a lot of photographic modeling. And then I remember one day sort of sitting in my, Mick and I had broken up, temporarily. And I remember sitting in my sitting room, in a little sitting room, and suddenly it was almost as if I had this incredible aha moment, where you just start seeing stuff very, very clearly, but at the same time, it felt timeless. So I guess that was a connection in its way too. And I called it my sort of spiritual awakening, because from then on, I realized that modeling, although I could have carried on doing it, didn't give me any sense of purpose or meaning. And so that was the first time. I was 18, I think, and it was the first time I realized that was very important to me in my life. And it just so happened, which often happens in the world, in our life, that a friend of mine who had a shop in San Francisco asked me if I would like to come and help her open up this shop. And she's American, but she'd been living in England. And so she kind of was part of the 60s scene, and she wanted to replicate it in San Francisco. And so I did. I had to decide whether to do 3 months rent on my apartment or a one-way ticket to San Francisco. So I took the one-way ticket.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at that time. Yeah, good decision. And I didn't know at that time that anything to do with flower power or hippies or anything, because of course things like that didn't kind of come across the Atlantic then.
Mm-hmm.
And so there they were, and all these people I met, it was like this subculture had all experienced this same thing.
Describe that scene. What was that like the first time you saw a group of
it was
just freedom
incredible.
dancing?
It was just the freedom. I still had the designers were Folan Tuffin, very sort of smart suits for the first time and all that stuff. And I had to get rid of all of those and sort of wear beads and sort of flowing things. And it was incredible. It was just like such an eye-opener. And so I stayed there for 6 months, and I went to the Monterey Pop Festival, and I met up with, saw a lot of the bands of that time, like the Jefferson Airplane, and got to know Paul Kantner and Big Brother and the Holding Company. So all that San Francisco sound, it was great. We'd go and listen to music or go and watch them play, but everybody seemed to know everybody. It was like a huge family.
Yeah, my mom and my dad met each other in high school and went to San Francisco to see Jefferson Airplane. I always get it backwards. Anyway, they went up and saw the concert, and then here I am. So yes, so that's I've heard these stories of how powerful that all was, and that the music in that time up there in San Francisco. Okay, we got to take a real quick break. Jenny, can you, just before we go to break though, for the listener who, I know it's well documented, a flower child that time, but in the most, boiling it down to its main essence, if you could describe, just to put that image in the mind of the listener, the younger listeners that are enjoying this story, what is the flower child in definition, and what, if you can?
I think I didn't think it was called flower child to begin with, but then what was happening, because people were wanting to show love to each other, because this was sort of, there were certain areas, obviously like Haight-Ashbury and Grant Avenue, and where people would literally give flowers to each other. And it was about love, and it was about create just be yourself, and about creativity, and but they would give flowers to each other, so you became a flower child.
I didn't know that last part. believe it or not.
I never thought of that before until I just said it.
Well, I love this conversation. We are talking with author Jenny Boyd. The new book is Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. You can get an autographed copy at thejennyboyd.com and follow her on Instagram at Jenny_Boyd Levitt. So I'm going to spell BoydLevitt. Mick Fleetwood says of Jenny Boyd's autobiography, Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse, the beautifully poignant story of a partner, a mother, a friend, and truly inspirational woman. Beatles Fan Magazine says a must read for those interested in Beatles history. Pick up your copy today on Amazon or go to thejennyboyd.com and get your autographed copy. I want to mention before we talk about the music here in the show and go to break, Dr. D, I know you need me to do that. This soundtrack was handpicked by Jenny Boyd. This is your playlist that you created for us. Thank you so much for doing that. So this is music from your life, I'm sure. And I'll let Kat take us to break with the title of the song. We'll be right back with more from Jenny Boyd.
We're going to hear Mary Wells' My Guy. Can you tell me why you picked this song briefly?
And do that on the other side of the break.
Oh, okay.
Richard. Sorry, Richard, we're a little over. Let's do, tell us about that after Mary Wells' My Guy when we come right back. Thanks, Kat.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Jenny, did you get my email regarding maybe reading a sentence or two from some of the chapters?
I did. I did.
So why don't we do this, Kat? When we come back, we'll have, do you have something to say about My Guy, why you chose that, and Satisfaction?
Okay, one another thing about the 60s is that we had these particular clubs where they would play the best music, and it was Motown. And I love to dance, and I would dance, and often we'd go with Patty and George and the rest of the Beatles. And My Guy just popped into my head when you asked that question.
Oh, cool. Well, you're going to have to say all that again when we record you right now. We're coming back right now.
Coming back in 3, 2, 1. You're live.
Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. You just heard Mary Wells' My Guy, and also coming back in some Rolling Stones Satisfaction Live. Again, handpicked by Jenny Boyd. Tell us why you chose My Guy, why that popped into your head when we asked you to pick some songs.
Okay. During the 60s, he and George and the rest of the Beatles and Mick, my boyfriend, Mick Fleetwood, and I would go to clubs together. And there were some great clubs. They were quite exclusive. And that's where they were mostly musicians. And one of these was the Scotch of St. James's that became very famous. And I just remember when I first heard Motown, it was Mary Wells. Oh. And it was a great song to dance to, and Mick and I would often dance together. And so it just reminded me of that time.
Oh, I love that.
That's sweet. That's sweet. How about Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, which we just came back with?
Okay.
Is there a story?
Yes,
Many stories.
Story. I was working in this little shop that Folan Tuffin, who these designers, they opened up a shop. And so when I wasn't modeling, they'd ask if I would just work in the shop. And when I was in there, Patty called me and said, we're going off to the south of France. Do you want to come with us? And I couldn't because I was working, but I said, I'll come at the weekend. So I went off, joined them in the south of France, her and another friend of hers and me. And we went to this club called I think it's called the Voom Voom of that time. And when I walked in, there was this song, Satisfaction, just blew my mind. So another great dancing song.
And you know the guys in the Rolling Stones too, right?
Well, in my book, Musicians in Tune, and in England it came out as It's Not Only Rock and Roll. I interviewed Keith Richards for it, and Mick I'd seen over the years, in the 60s a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great stories. Thanks for sharing. Could I impose on you to read something from your book for us?
Yeah. Okie dokie.
And what a honor to have Jenny Boyd, the author, actually read. This is such a great book. Pick up your copy while she is prepping there at Amazon or at her website, thejennyboyd.com. And it's Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. All right, Jenny.
So this was while I was waiting to go to India. I was asked if I would work in the Beatles Apple boutique. It had just opened. And so I think I had about 2-3 months to wait until we went to India. So while I was in there one day, I saw Donovan. And I'd met Donovan before. I think he'd been to visit Patty and George sort of maybe the year before. So he saw me there and said, "Oh, I didn't know you worked here." And so we chatted. And then I'm just now, oops, sorry, lost you for a second. So now I said, I saw Donovan in the shop a few days later, but this time he didn't stay long. He'd come to ask me if I'd like to spend the following Saturday with him at his manager's house in the country. When I arrived, there were a few people chatting and milling around the house, including his manager, and after being introduced, we were herded into the dining room. After lunch, Donovan took me aside, saying he'd written a song and wanted to play it to me. I followed him into one of the bedrooms where he sat on a double bed, and as he leaned his back against the wooden headboard, he picked up his guitar. I took my shoes off and jumped on the bed and sat cross-legged opposite him, trying to ignore the sudden feeling of intimacy sitting on the bed together had created. He began singing Juniper. He looked at me as he sang, and I could feel my eyes welling up. I realized it was a song about me. I thought it was the prettiest song I'd ever heard. I loved the sound of his acoustic guitar and his gentle voice. He reminded me of a troubadour or minstrel from days of old, of courtly love and chivalry. As I listened closely to the words, "Is she breathing? Yes, very low," I knew it was about me meditating. But as it got closer to the end, I'm thinking what it would be like if she loved me. I realized it was a declaration of his love. Luckily, as the lyrics changed from English to French, I had a chance, not understanding a word, to look up and smile at him. But inside I knew this song could take our friendship onto another level. And was I ready?
Yeah, man, if that's not enough reason for you to go pick up your copy and find out what happens. I love that line too. Juniper lives upon the hill. Juniper sitting very still. Is she sleeping? I don't think so. I love that line. Is she breathing?
Mhm.
Yes, very low. That's such a great line, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
oh boy. Wow, that actually gave me chills a little bit.
Oh.
Thank you for reading that one, sharing that with us.
And
Kat,
over the years, I've heard it, I hit in an elevator or in some shop in the market or stuff like this. And it always takes me back to that time. And it represents for me a time of innocence. It's like 60s. It was such a time of innocence. And that song reminds me of
that comes through in your writing too, the way you just described that experience, the intimacy almost there and the innocence at the same time, and the nervousness of, of a young girl and a musician singing to her and wrote a song about her. Very, very, very cool. Thank you. Kat, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know. Take it. We're going to take a break, Dr. D? Okay. Kat, take us a break. And what music are we going to listen to here? That Jenny Boyd, her playlist for the song, for the show. What an honor to have you choose the music for this show.
Well, Jenny picked one of my favorites by Nina Simone, I Put a Spell on You. Why did you pick that one, Jenny?
Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat.
Let's take the break. Let's take the break so that you can get some more water, and we'll have you describe it on the way back. Is that okay, Kat?
Yep, that
Good
works.
with you? We will be right back with Jenny Boyd, author of the new book,
Maybe it was
Juniper,
reading that.
A Journey Beyond the Muse. Can we get Kat to read that now for the commercial? Dr. D,
All right, Kat.
her
One second,
version.
I gotta put my glasses on.
We're all blind here.
Oh, this is a new adventure for Kat.
Like those glasses, Kat. Those are nice.
Thank you. I even have like a little thing, hook them up. Okay.
Okay, stand by. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Jennifer Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. You can follow her on Instagram at Jenny_Boyd Levitt. That's JENNY_BOYD LEVITT. That's on Instagram. And you can also go to www.thejennyboyd.com. Mick Fleetwood says of Jenny Boyd's autobiography called Jennifer Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse, the beautifully poignant story of a partner, mother, friend, and truly inspirational woman. Beatles Fan Magazine says a must read for those interested in Beatles history. Again, you can go to Amazon, pick up your copy, but I suggest you go to thejennyboyd.com and get an autographed copy.
Okay, very good.
So Kat, you're going to bring it back, and we've got Jenny 10 minutes left. Is that okay with you? You got 10 minutes for us?
Yep.
Okay. So, Kat, just to kind of powwow here real quick, as we have so much here, you can take any of these questions you want or your own, obviously. But I do want to kind of end on the last chapter, Purpose Found, and what Jenny's learned, that kind of a thing. Leave with that really positive message. And then I wanted to, when we come back and you're asking about the music, maybe ask about the cover art from our friend Larry, so that we can plug him and give him a little,
nice.
of the book, the cover art. Larry.
And Larry.
I always say Vigon, right? Vigon. Yeah. Larry. Vigon, yes. Larry Vigon. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to ask about one song, because I'll just ask about Nina Simone. I'm not going to talk about Stevie Wonder.
Okay, we've only got 9 minutes, and Jenny, we need like 4 more days with you. Is that okay?
Can we come visit? So I'll bring us back, talk about Nina Simone, then I'll go straight into cover art to give him a plug, and then I'll toss to you, Jeremiah.
Oh, no, take the rest if you want, if you'd like. You can just talk. I think we should go through. I would love to discuss, if we have time, the creative drive of the musicians from her first book, and then maybe a little bit about the heartache and the.
Yeah, I think we need to
take it wherever you want.
This out with some of the heartache and
yeah. I love.
I'm going to be the John Lennon of this little thing.
And then Purpose Found. I love it.
Maybe we can play the Jennifer Juniper song.
We play it in its entirety at the very, very end. We play it for you at the very end. That's how we go out. You can't hear it here, but you'll hear it later. Okay, Kat, go for it. I'm going to tell Mike we're going to be 5 minutes late too.
Okay, perfect.
All right, stand by.
For the next show.
In 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. We need more time with Jenny Boyd. She's fascinating. She's inspiring us, but no surprise there. She just does that naturally. So real quick, I wanted to know, Nina Simone, I Put a Spell on You. Why did you choose that song for us?
Oh my God. That's
other than the obvious.
It's so moving, and it moves me every time and has done for the last 100 years, I'm sure. That one I first heard when Mick and I were just starting to date. So we're way back now, sort of 64, 65. And I was very shy, and he was horribly shy. And he'd taken me back to this room that he shared with his friend Peter Bardens, who then was playing with in the band Them with Van Morrison. And so Mick and I were sort of sitting in this huge room, and then he gave me a little spliff to have and neither of us could say anything. Then of course it got even worse, and it was terrible, and I couldn't get off my chair because I was sort of just bombed out. And Nina Simone came on, And it was like,
Ooh,
oh
okay.
God, I
Nice.
wish he'd just take me in his arms and wheel me around the room. And all I could do was like sit there like a zombie, but listening to Nina Simone, which was just a
Good.
heartbreaking
Did
song.
Mick pick that? Did Mick pick that song? Good choice,
No, I
Mick.
think it was
Or
just
come
one.
on.
No. I think it was one of the songs. Remember, it used to be where one record would sort of plop on top of the other one.
Yeah.
There was
Oh, yeah.
that. There was Bobby Blue Band, and there was a couple of others. But that Nina Simone just, oh,
I love that.
incredible.
I love that. I'm gonna listen to that when we finish, and get bombed. No, I'm just kidding. I want to give a quick plug to the cover art, Larry Vigon, and just make sure that we acknowledge him, because God, what a talent! And yes, blow chef's kisses
We love
to
Larry.
him. So make sure that everyone
Yes,
knows who he is. Gorgeous.
yes.
So we've
Yeah.
talked so much about the positives and just sort of how you managed to sort of have this easy access to this beautiful life and do so many great things with it. But we all know that this is a human experience and there's gonna be the other side of the coin. So let's talk a little bit about that. Your relationship with fame and the money and drugs and heartache, and what's the rest of the picture look like for you? Can you describe kind of the full 360 of it?
Yes. After the sort of innocence of the 60s, then it became the sort of decadence of the 70s. And so we moved, John McVie and Chris McVie, Mick and me and our children, we all moved to LA. And that's where he met Stevie and Lindsay. And it was an immediate chemistry, just you could just tell it was going to their rehearsals, and I just knew this was huge. This was going to be huge. And there's always been a fear. There was always a fear, because I'm this young mother with small children. I don't know anybody else who's got little kids. And that if Mick became famous, although I wanted it for him and I wanted him to have that, I knew it would take him away from us as a sort of father, or that sort of relationship. And sure enough, it did. And on the other hand, it was such fun, and I love listening to the music. And when I'd go down to the studio, when I'd find a babysitter or whoever could look after the children for the night, it was great. It was just so compelling. But then, of course, at that time, they were having to prove themselves, because it was their first album in Los Angeles, and Warner Brothers were needing to have it by a certain time. And that's when everybody was starting to take cocaine, in the artists. And to begin with, it was just so they could keep playing. And then, of course, it took off in a whole nother kind of, more than that. And so that's where the drugs and the alcohol came in. And I definitely did my share of that. But then at other times, I'd be home with the children when they were on the road, drinking chamomile tea and listening to classical music, writing my poetry. And so it was like having two different lives. And which is, after a while, that gets really difficult. And we couldn't have Mick. And if he did come home late or come home at all, he was very tired. So it was a few years of that. And that became more difficult. And I thought, well, it was bittersweet, because then we'd go on the road with the little kids, and then they'd see their dad playing, and the music's wonderful. But it was, it came at such a cost.
Yeah, I feel that. What did you learn? I mean, the beginning of your story is, from what I gather about you, is you had such an innocence about you, but also kind of maybe this unknown sense of self. It feels like, as I listen to you describe yourself, you really knew who you were. But do you look back on your, the 16, 18-year-old self and think, I really knew who I was? Or was it just innocence that drove you? And then you found yourself as a mom of 2 young children. And then is it like a reality flash of like, oh, whoa, like a wake up kind of call compared to being 16 and 17?
Yeah, well, I think my first wake-up call, the really profound one, was the one when I was 18, the sort of, felt like the spiritual awakening. And that, to me, I thought, it's as if I knew a part of myself that I never knew before, and it was much deeper. And it was like a real sense of self. I think that was my first experience of a real sense of self. And then I was kind of on this search then for other people who felt the same. And that's when I went to San Francisco a little while later and tried getting to that same place by smoking dope or, taking the few acid trips that I did. And or even then it wasn't fun. It was more like still searching for this, what is it? What is this thing, this greater than us thing? And so I was pretty serious as a teenager. But then once we got, and then of course we went to India not long after that. So then I realized meditation was what was the thing that I'd actually really been looking for without realizing. But then once I got into, getting to be with, although Mick and I had known each other for years, when we actually got together and being with the band, we all lived together in one house in England and then moved to LA. But once I think drinking came in and, the sort of drugs, that seemed to take away from my sense of self. And I was aware of that. And I'd find that sense of self when I would be with the kids then when they were on the road. And as I said, it was much more peaceful and calm. But it took me a while, quite a few years, to realize it's not me. That's not me. I don't do very well in that. I do much better when I'm more connected to myself without taking any kind of substance.
Yeah.
And so that took many years. And then finally, I think my turning point was years later when I remarried, also another drummer, English drummer, and I thought there was something familiar about him. Well, yeah, and that was Ian Wallace. And he, at that time, he was playing with Bob Dylan. He was more like a hired gun. He'd play with all these great musicians. And that was fun, and that was okay. But when we went to Hawaii, went to Maui, where we'd known for years before, I had anyway. I had it was our I suppose it was sort of honeymoon, but then he decided he wanted to have a couple of his musician friends to come along as well, knowing that they would have some drugs. And I took something, it was like mescaline, I think that's what it was, like, but synthetic. And everybody took some, and I hadn't had anything like that for years. And I went out, we all decided to go and swim, and I'd always been not a very strong swimmer. I went out quite far out, and I was trying to catch up with the others. And then this effect came on, and I thought I could breathe underwater.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
no.
I was so mesmerized by everything at the bottom, and I just thought, well, I can breathe underwater. And then I realized what was happening, and I was very scared because I thought, oh my God, maybe, I don't know, whether I'd even get back to shore or not, or whether that would take over again, where I thought I could breathe underwater. Anyway, when I came out, it was like wake up number 2, but this time I wanted to do something with my life. And that's when I went to go and talk to kids in schools about drugs and alcohol. And that's when I went to college, which I'd never been to before, and started doing my BA, then my MA, and then my PhD. So that was that turning point.
Yeah. Wow. And with
Did I
that,
tell you, you need to buy this book. This book is really, really great. Purpose Found. Jenny Boyd, right? Purpose Found. Final chapter. Okay, we regrettably, we need to let you go. You are in London tonight, yes? Are you in London right now when we found you?
Well, I'm in Norfolk, so it's a couple of hours drive north of London, and it's out in the countryside.
Well, you're going to be visiting Santa Barbara soon, so we will have that cup of coffee, and I'll get to hear more stories. Hopefully, Kat can come join us, and Richard.
I will jump on a flight. You just tell me when, and I'll jump on a flight.
Yeah. As soon as I get over there, I'll be there.
Jenny, do you have one more quick one in you that you could read before to take us out
Sure.
from your book?
What should we have?
The book is
Ooh, yes, I think
Jennifer
something we-
Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse by Jenny Boyd.
So this bit is I'm about to meet my father. I haven't seen him for like 35 years because he never contacted us when we left Africa. My mother went married again. Never heard anything from him. And then finally, when I was doing my MA, I wrote a letter. I found out where he was working, wrote to him and said, I'm your daughter, kind of thing. Anyway, so finally, I was allowed to meet him. I knew that his wife, whoever she was, hadn't told their children that he'd got 4 children from another woman before then. So we were secrets, basically. So I've gone to visit him. And this is the first time in all these years. I don't even have any connection or feeling that he's my father at all. Do you have any photographs of us in Africa? I asked, looking around the sparsely decorated room. Sorry, one more thing. He's separated from his wife. Okay. He looked at me and shook his head. Do you remember any stories of us in Kenya? I continued, trying to keep the conversation upbeat. Again, he shook his head. I suddenly became aware of the silence, hissing and swirling all around me. I could feel myself beginning to panic with the prospect of a whole evening to get through and then sleeping in the same room, beds almost touching, with this stranger. Do you remember me as a little girl? I asked, feeling as though I was now scraping the barrel. No, he said. Then his eyes lit up and he smiled. But I do remember my horses. My heart sank. We ate a cold, tasteless quiche in silence. My head was on its way to a pounding migraine. Keep talking, I told myself, as I said whatever came into my head, unable to bear the silence. Once we'd finished eating, I took the plates into the tiny kitchen and began washing them in the sink. With the tap running, a plate in one hand and the washing up brush in the other, I felt to my horror 2 arms grab me around my waist from behind as he pulled me against his body. I jumped in panic. Then it struck me for the second time that I had to sleep in the same bedroom as this man, just 1 foot away from his bed. I wanted to run away right there and then, to jump into my car and keep driving until I got home. But how could I, even though I was a grown woman and had just been groped by my father, the man I'd been searching for all my life? I had never been in this situation before, and I didn't know how to handle it. The reality was that I still didn't have a voice. I didn't know how to say, how dare you, or I'm leaving.
Wow.
Ooh.
The book is Jennifer Juniper, A Journey Beyond the Muse. Jenny Boyd has been our special guest this hour. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. And we have to have you back. I just hope you'll say yes.
I would love to. This has been really fun. Thank you all.
It's been great. Really great time with you. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. Everyone out there, communicate, listen more, and evolve. Everybody have a great week.